Hey guys, in this video I'm going to explain the second logic game of the June 2014 LSAT, which is PrepTest 72. In this game we've got a realtor showing 5 houses, one in each neighborhood, shown in a particular order. So this is an ordering game. This game wasn't too bad, but the rules are a little bit annoying. I'll walk through them. We've got the 5 houses, QRSTV. We have them being shown in order from 1 to 5. We've got R either first or second, so it can't be any of 3, 4, or 5. We've got T first or fifth, so it can't be any of 2, 3, or 4. The third house is Q or V. And then Q cannot touch S. Q and S cannot be consecutive. So that's it in terms of a bare bones diagramming of the rules. You could leave it at this and go on to the questions, or you could do a little bit more. Given that we have to have Q or V on 3, and that we have a rule about Q, that it can't ever touch S, I like to split this into 2 different main diagrams based on whether we have Q on 3 or V on 3. So I'll lay that out right now just to show you what it looks like. Okay, so here we have Q on 3 and V on 3. When Q's on 3, we cannot have S on any of 2, 3, or 4, so S will have to be on either 1 or 5, just like T does based on the second rule. So T and S are going to be interchangeable on 1 and 5, and since R can't be in 1 anymore, it's forced over to space number 2, leaving variable V to go on 4, since there's really nowhere else that it can go at all. So the first top diagram here with Q on 3 is actually pretty limited, whereas the bottom diagram with V on 3 is a bit more open-ended because there aren't really any rules about V other than that it has to be alternating with Q on 3. One of those two has to go on space 3. So that's pretty much it for our upfront setup. We'll be able to do more over the course of the game based on specific questions, of course. So let's jump in with question number 7. If Q is fourth, what must be true? So if Q were fourth, we'd have to be in the bottom diagram since the top one has Q on 3. So let's stick Q down on number 4 and see what happens. Well, if Q's fourth, we're not going to be able to have S on either 3 or 5 because of the last rule saying that Q and S cannot touch. So S is going to be limited to 1 or 2, interchangeable with R, since R has to go on either 1 or 2, and that leaves T to go on number 5. Now they're asking us simply what must be true. R is first. No, R could be either 1 or 2. R is second. No, again, R could be either 1 or 2. S second. No, it could be 1 or 2. T's first. No, actually T was forced over to 5. So D's gone, leaving E by elimination, which of course simply says V was on 3. So we did a little bit more work here than we needed to, but that's okay. We didn't know they would ask us something relatively easy, and having this diagram may help us go forward. It's easier to do your drawing first, then you're looking, rather than draw, look, draw, look. Your personal preference may differ from this, but this is the way I would approach it. Anyway, that's it for number 7. Let's move on to number 8. Alright, so number 8 is asking us which one of the following would fully determine the diagram, leaving no ambiguity at all. So we'll just run through the choices. Q third. Well, looking over here, we still had a lot of ambiguity when Q was third. S and T were interchangeable on 1 and 5. So Q being third does not determine it fully. That's eliminated. R first. That would only happen in the bottom diagram, but even if it did, that would simply tell us R1, V3, then T5. Q and S would be interchangeable on 2 and 4. So that would not fully determine everything, and B is gone. Looking at C, S is second. Well, if S were second, again that's only happening within the bottom diagram. S second, forces R to be on 1, and then T is going to have to go to 5, leaving Q on 4. So we now have R, S, V, Q, T. Things actually are fully determined with S on 2. So S on 2 is our answer here, choice C. We could take a quick look at D and E though. T on 5. That could happen in either the top diagram or the bottom diagram. It's not determining everything. And then E, V on 4. Even on the top diagram, when V is on 4, we still have S and T interchangeable, so things are not fully determined there either, leaving C for number 8. Next, number 9. If S was before Q, what must be true? So that right off the bat, that appears to be possible in either of the two diagrams, the two main diagrams here. So I'll just start with the top one and work from there. If S was before Q, we'd have S on 1, Q on 3, T on 5. They're asking what must be true, so if something did not occur in this diagram, then it is not a must. So Q fourth obviously is not a must since we have Q third. R second happened, so we'll keep it. S first happened, so we'll keep it. T fifth also happened, so we'll keep it. V third did not happen, so that's gone. We're down to B, C, and D. Let's move on now to the bottom diagram. So the bottom diagram, S before Q, since Q and S cannot ever touch, that's telling us that S will have to go in either 1 or 2, and Q will have to go in either 4 or 5. So if S is either 1 or 2, and we've got to fit R in there also, T's not going to be able to go in the first 2, so T's going to have to go on 5, and Q's going to have to go on 4. So we have R and S interchangeable on 1 and 2, V on 3, Q on 4, T on 5. Now let's run through. Must R be second? No, it could be first. B's gone. Must S be first? No, it could be second. So C's gone, leaving D by elimination, where of course we do have T on 5 on bottom and on top. So that's our answer. Pick it, move on. Next, number 10, general could be true question. I would take, the 5 answer choices and check them against all of our previous work to see whether any of those could be true based on previous scenarios, but they're all talking about the placements of Q and V. And from what we've seen on our main diagrams, we've only seen either Q being third and V being third, or V being fourth. So obviously we know that V can only go on either 3 or 4. So right away, we can get rid of C, D, and E since our two main diagrams are all the possibilities for the game. The real question is whether we could have Q on 1 or Q on 5, and we've never seen either of those happen. So I would actually skip the rest of this question, come back to it later. Maybe a future diagram will reveal whether Q could go on either 1 or 5, but at least you can get rid of C, D, and E based on these two major possibilities. Alternatively, you could just make two different diagrams, one with Q on 1, one with Q on 5, and see if that could work. So if that's your preference, do that now. You'll be able to figure it out. I prefer to hold off, do a little bit more work on 11 or maybe 12, then come back. So number 11, if V is third, what must be true? So V third, we're in the bottom diagram. We never actually locked down any of these other variables fully, so we're going to have to do a little bit more work here. Variables not mentioned on this diagram are S and Q, and we know they cannot touch. Back in number 9, when we talked about S being earlier than Q, for the bottom diagram, we knew that meant that S had to go within the first 2 and Q had to go within the last 2 because they couldn't touch. Now what we can simply say is that one of Q or S will go in the first 2 spaces and one of them will go within the second 2 spaces. So that being the case, this means that we have one of Q or S in the first 2, just like R, so T is actually forced later. So T is going to actually have to be on 5 within this diagram. One of S or Q will have to go on 4, and then Q/S is alternating with the R. So T on 5 is actually locked down. That's a must. So E is our answer to number 11. So we just did number 11, got our answer for that, drew a new diagram. We can use that diagram's work here to help us solve number 10 when choosing between A and B. We see that Q or S had to alternate with R in the first two spaces, meaning either R is 1 and then one of Q or S is 2, or one of Q or S is on 1 and then R is on 2. So could we have Q on 1? Yes, we could have Q, R, V, S, T on 1 to 5, and that would work out perfectly fine, no issues at all, giving us A is our answer for number 10. Next, number 12, we've got one of those really annoying rule substitution questions where we're looking for a rule that has an equivalent impact to the one they're referring to. So it's no more limiting and no less limiting, has exactly the same effect. So they're talking about R being first or second. We're looking for something that has an identical impact on the game. So we'll run through the choices. A, R cannot be fourth. Well, of course, we know that it's never possible for R to be on 4. We always have V, S, or Q on 4. But would that have the same impact? No. If we simply learned as new information that R could not be fourth, that would still allow R to be fifth. That would not prevent that from happening like the original rule did. So A does not have the same effect. A is gone. Looking at B, R before V, well, let's interpret that. Right now, R has to go before V. On the top diagram, it's on 2 and V's on 4. On the bottom diagram, R is either 1 or 2 and V's on 3. And we know that V has to be on either 4 or 3 due to the other original rules. So saying that R has to go earlier than V is effectively forcing it to be either first or second, so that actually works out fine. So we could pick that, but I would understand still wanting to run through the others just in case. So V being third or fourth, we actually already know that based on other rules in the game. So C is gone. Looking at D, Q has to touch R. That doesn't actually even have to ever happen all the time. That doesn't actually have to happen all the time due to our correct answer from number 8, choice C, where we had R1, S2, V3. In that case, Q and R were not touching because then we had Q on 4. So we had R1, Q4. They were not consecutive. So D is actually not something that would have the same effect since it didn't have to happen under the original constraints, the original rules. Then finally, choice E, if T is not fifth, then it must go immediately before R. That's always been the case in our main diagrams here for this game, but imposing that as a new restriction would not limit R to be necessarily first or second, because it would allow for the possibility that when T was fifth, R could be fourth. So R would not be limited to either 1 or 2 specifically. So E is not equivalent, leaving B as our answer for number 12, and that's the game.